So this week, as you might be binging episodes and shopping and getting your fill of all things non-work related, I thought it might be helpful to switch things up a little bit for this week's episode and to give you a little bit of a glimpse inside my world. Yes, inside the mind of an inclusive marketing strategist and consultant, but also to give you some insights, pull back the curtain a little bit to help you understand about my journey to getting to this place where I'm talking to you every week about inclusive marketing, but also how I arrived at this place in my business, because this is not the business that I set out to start whenever I left my corporate job more than 12 years ago. So after this short break, you're going to hear some tea as I have a great conversation with my buddy Eman Ismail, who hosts a really amazing, wonderful, fantastic podcast called Mistakes That Made Me. Did you know that most businesses only use 20% of their data? That's like reading a book with most of the pages torn out, or paying for a coffee that's just 1/5 full. Point is, you miss a lot unless you use HubSpot. Their customer platform gives you access to the data you need to grow your business. The insights trapped in emails, call logs, and transcripts, all that unstructured data that makes all the difference. Because when you know more, you grow more. And when you get a full cup of coffee, you can do more too. But I digress. Visit HubSpot.com today.
Whenever anyone says the word inclusion, the first person I think of is Sonia Thompson. Sonia is a well-known, extremely respected inclusive marketing strategist, consultant, and coach. She writes columns for Inc., Forbes, and HubSpot on inclusive marketing, customer experience, and belonging. She's also the host of the Inclusion and Marketing podcast. Sonia has officially nailed her niche. She's a fierce thought leader in this field, so it was really surprising to me when she told me it took her years to discover and then master her niche. She actually told me she felt lost for the first 5 or 6 years of her business and that she wasn't really sure what she was working towards until she did. Now, I am a huge proponent of niching or specializing because I've seen the impact it's had on my own business. I went from generalist copywriter to email strategist in late 2019, early 2020. And being known for one thing skyrocketed my business, brought me dream clients and dream brand partnerships as well. I believe in niching so much that I created a 90-minute masterclass called Nail Your Niche for service providers and consultants. It's probably the most popular product I sell. By the way, I'll put the link in the show notes for you in case you're also ready to nail your niche. It's only $39. But here's the thing. I don't think niching is the only way to become successful in business, but I do think it's the fastest way to become successful in business. As you'll see from Sonia's story, becoming an expert in one particular area, becoming the go-to specialist in your field, can take years, but the effort is almost always gonna pay off.
I basically had just spent, let's say, 5-6 years in my business where it felt like I was floundering around developing extremely valuable skills that whenever I finally realized, oh, Sonia, this is your niche, all I had to do was flip the switch and the skills were there and I just needed to activate them.
On today's show, I'm speaking to Sonia Thompson, inclusive marketing strategist, consultant, and coach, about how not choosing a niche meant she was just floundering around for the first 5 or 6 years in her business and making a tiny fraction of her previous $200K corporate salary.
There's not a whole lot of proving myself specifically for them because I've been proving myself over the years with the body of work. And so you just sort of eliminate a lot of the competition and you almost sort of write your own template or job description for the different clients that you work with, which it's just a really wonderful feeling. And then hopefully it turns into, talk to her.
Welcome to Mistakes That Made Me, the podcast that asks extraordinary business owners to share their biggest business mistake so you know what not to do on your road to success. Mistakes That Made Me is brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. My name's Eman Ismail, and I'm an email strategist and copywriter for online business owners like you at emancopyco.com. I'm a podcast lover, a pizza binger, a proud mama of two, and I have this radical idea that if maybe us business owners were a little less guarded and a lot more open about the mistakes we've made, we could help each other grow a business that brings us more joy and less regret.
I am Sonia Thompson. I am an inclusive marketing strategist, consultant, and coach. You don't probably hear that too often, but basically what I do is I help brands attract and retain a bigger, more diverse, and fiercely loyal customer base through inclusive marketing, which basically means I help them do a better job of engaging people that most brands have ignored for a very long time because of their identity. And in most instances, it was never intentional ignoring them. It was just because they never thought that people have these differences and that impacts the choices that they make as consumers, or that people with differences, which we all do, right, could impact overall the way in which they show up and receive messages, then they're losing out on a lot of people. So as more and more brands are starting to recognize that everyone has some sort of difference and that they care about that whenever it comes time to make their buying decisions, they're recognizing that they have to change their marketing. I like to say inclusive marketing is the future of marketing, and more we're starting to see that future is today.
Yeah, I love that. This is a topic that I feel really strongly about for so many reasons. I think the work that you do is so important. And it's also just fascinating. I was watching one of your breakdowns on, was it Ben and Jerry's, and how their marketing is exclusive and what they're doing well. And I think even what they could improve. It was fascinating. It was so interesting to watch. And when I think of this work, I think about me as a little Black girl who used to run to the shop every Saturday morning and buy my, those teen magazines, and never see anyone who looked like me. And I remember feeling so, as a young teen, feeling so unseen, just I didn't exist. I didn't matter. People who look like me didn't matter. We didn't even warrant just give us a model, just one model who looks like us. The makeup pages would be catered for, white skin and
right,
and European hair with all the hair pages. And it was just honestly, it was a really difficult experience. And I know that every little Black girl has experienced this.
Yes.
But then you grow up and it stays with you and it impacts you in so many ways. And I guess my question is, I care very deeply about this topic, but why should brands care? And also, why should people in privileged positions who can just carry on with their lives and not bother themselves with it? Because they're not impacted by this.
Yeah.
In some ways, and I'm sure they are in other ways. Because you said, we all have differences, right? Mm-hmm. So I think everyone will experience this in different ways.
Yeah.
Why should brands care, and why should people care?
So there's two different things. There's the moral imperative, right? Which is being inclusive and making more people feel seen is the right thing to do. But we've seen over the years that the moral imperative isn't enough to make brands care about this and make meaningful change that lasts more than a news cycle, right? So ultimately, brands should care about inclusive marketing because it's what they need to stay relevant and to grow. Inclusive marketing is directly related to business results. So, give you a quick example. I follow a gluten-free diet for health reasons. And a couple of years ago, we went to a small family reunion. There were 14 of us, not very many, right? But I'm gluten-free and my sister is also gluten-free. And there were a number of restaurants we went to New Orleans that we were looking at for the dinners that we had scheduled. And guess what happened? We only went to restaurants that had gluten-free menus that were dedicated, that they specifically it was clear on their website that they had taken the time to think about and say, hey, gluten-free people, we see you. You're welcome here. Not just a restaurant that's like, we've got one thing on the menu for you to eat, right? Mm-hmm. Because nobody wants that, right? So we went, all 14 of us, even though only 2 of us were gluten-free, the only restaurants were considered were the ones that had taken that approach. So what I like to think about this is the niche consumer or the underrepresented and underserved identities are often the lead consumer in instances because people want to do things where their friends, their families, their loved ones can take part. And so anytime I go out to eat with a person, a family member, a friend, guess who chooses the restaurant? It's me. I choose a restaurant because they want to know that we're going to go to a place that I am going to be able to have my needs met, where I'm going to be able to have a wonderful meal that I will enjoy and not be mad because I just paid $50 for a meal that was just like a salad that wasn't good. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there's a lot of that really is starting to help people make their decisions, not just for the people who are part of that community, but also the people who love them. But there's also more and more that we're starting to see that, as I said, a lot of consumers have differences, and there are so many different dimensions of diversity, and not saying that every brand needs to be thinking about all those dimensions of diversity and serving all of them. But we just need to be aware. This really kind of hit in 2017 where we started paying attention to it more whenever Rihanna's brand Fenty Beauty launched. Mm-hmm. And she launched with 40 shades of foundation to take into consideration people of different complexions all over the world, right? And so there were colors that were selling out. They had put a lot of thought into this campaign. People were just overjoyed. I saw all these posts, and there was like all these talks about the records that they broke, the sales that they generated, and what happened. Previously, the makeup industry where making all these shades of foundation was never something that they could do. It just wasn't possible for whatever reason. Suddenly, they were able to all start making 40 shades of foundation, and that became the standard. Why is that? Because they saw the business benefit. There are people who are going to buy these products, who are demanding it because now they see that it's possible, and they know that they're going to lose out on sales from people because they are going to be going elsewhere because their brands were inclusive. So they changed their ways, not because there was the right thing they do. They did it because they saw that it was going to, one, help them grow and also prevent them from losing more sales.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it would be great if the moral imperative was enough. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. A part of me feels like I wish it wasn't always about the money, but then also it's like, it is what it is. We live in the world that we live in. And at the end of the day, we get what we need, which is diversity and whatever it is that we're talking about. You mentioned dimensions of diversity. And I find it really interesting that you don't just talk about one dimension of diversity. No. When you talk about inclusivity, you're talking about a range of dimensions. So things, I mean, these are just some of the ones that I picked up on listening to you talk, but age, disability, gender, race, religion, body size, diet, just so many. So, I mean, I heard you say a little earlier that we don't need to, I mean, it's impossible for us to kind of meet every single requirement of every single dimension of diversity. It can feel really overwhelming for those of us who are trying to do better. I personally decided to focus on a couple of areas that I feel really strongly about, but then I feel like I'm doing a disservice to all the other issues that deserve, just as much attention. What can you say to this small business owner who is grappling with that? Is it okay that I'm just choosing like one or two issues to, work really hard and deep in?
Absolutely. So let's give a quick definition of what inclusive marketing is, right? So it's all about acknowledging the many ways that people are different. And this is the important part. Then choosing which identities you're going to serve and then incorporating them throughout all areas of your marketing mix. So that's the choosing part. Most brands struggle with inclusive marketing, meaning they're just not being inclusive. They're pushing people away because they haven't gone through the process of choosing who are the people that they want to make sure that they feel like they belong with them. So they'll say something like women, but they forget there's a broad diversity of women out there, right? And so because they don't choose, they end up excluding a lot of identities that they never even thought of. So that's just kind of like the first rule of inclusive marketing is you have to choose. If you have enough resources, like Rihanna, for instance, like Google, those are brands that are choosing to serve everyone. Love it. More power to you. That's great. We love to see it. However, there are a lot of other businesses and brands, especially small business owners, who can't do that. Mm-hmm. So you've got a podcast. Now, your podcast obviously isn't available in 10 different languages for all the people who speak different languages, prefer to speak in, or learn and listen to their content in their preferred language. That's an intentional choice. We're doing this podcast in English. That's your audience. And that's what you can do at this moment, right? Mm-hmm. Over time, you might choose to expand that if you have the resources, but that's not what you're going to do right now. And so we have to think about what can we do effectively? What are the audiences that we most want at this point in time to feel like they belong with our brand? And how can we make sure that in whatever it is that we're producing throughout our marketing mix, we're making those identities feel seen? Another caveat here is if you decide to say, hey, I want to serve left-handed people. I want them to make sure they feel like they belong. I want to serve gluten-free people. I want plus-size people to feel like they belong. That does not mean that someone who eats gluten and is vegan isn't welcome, right? Mm-hmm. It just means that you have specifically decided that you wanted to create a welcome environment for this group of people. And you can still serve a broad range. And even though you might not speak to them specifically, that doesn't mean that you're saying, I'm not taking your money. You're not welcome here.
Okay. That's really great to hear. And so in terms of, well, what I'm hearing you say is for the small business owner who wants to get better at inclusivity, they should pick an identity that matters to them, that they feel strongly about, and then work on doing better for that particular identity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's use an example because you might say that I want to make sure that I am supportive of the disability community, right? Mm-hmm. The disability community is very diverse, right? There's a lot of different types of ways in which people can have a disability and the way that can show itself. Now, you might then say, all right, specifically, I want to make sure that people who are neurodivergent feel like they belong with me. So I'm going to develop products, services, experiences, communications that make them feel seen and like they belong. That doesn't mean, of course, that everybody else isn't welcome, but you specifically want to make sure that the neurodivergent community at this point in time feels there. You may later on expand it to people who are visually impaired or who are colorblind or whatever it is that you're choosing or it's on your heart to do. Those things can happen once you have more capacity, once you have more resources to do it right. But at this point in time, for instance, we're going to make sure that we do what we can to make sure that we see and support and make sure that the people who are neurodivergent achieve success with my brand. And that's totally fine.
Okay. I love it. So here are some of the issues that I've been experiencing, which I'm sure you have also experienced. So, I mean, I've experienced frustration sometimes when I've seen people celebrating themselves and celebrating the fact that they have been, for example, able to gather such a diverse, like speaking panel or whatever else. And I look and yes, it's all women, but it's all white women.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no other types of diversity in there. So you did great in terms of like gender diversity. If I guess like platforming women was your goal.
Right.
But you failed in so many other different areas. And I've been in positions where, you know, I've been asked to do speaking events, and I'm sure you have too, where, you know, you say yes to this thing and then you see the lineup and you're the only Black person and you just think,
you feel like a token.
Am I the token? Yeah. Great. Because this is something we've lived with our entire lives. I saw a TikTok recently that made me laugh so much because it was so true and so painful, but so funny is, you know, when you're at like university or college, your campus, you hide from the camera people and you just hide because they're always on the lookout for you because they always want to take pictures of the Black people or ethnic minorities, as we call us in the UK, to prove that we're a diverse community. And they're usually really not. That's why they're chasing you with a camera. But then it becomes like that. It's like, oh, I'm the token. Oh, great. I'm just a symbol of the fake diversity that you're trying to create. That's not even real.
Yeah.
And I haven't done anything about this yet because honestly, I'm exhausted. But how do you even go about challenging something like that? How do you even approach a host and talk about something like that?
So I've only sort of said something one time because different people take different approaches. And generally my approach isn't to like call people out, or as other people, like they say, they call them in. I did so one time with an influencer that I very much respect. And I did it in the format of I sent her a DM because I saw that she was promoting a conference that she was going to be speaking at. And whenever she showed the graphic that they provided, like, I'm like, where are the Black people? Where is because I define diversity, not just of, oh, look at all the women. For me, I'm specifically looking to see, do you have any Black women? Right. Yes. I'm specifically looking at.
Can I clarify as well? And yes, I mean Black women, but also I think we mean actually just non-white women as well.
Yes.
Like a lot of the time it's literally you are the only non-white woman, or there are no non-white women.
Right.
So in that, like, where is the diversity? It's insane.
Well, so I wrote her this DM and I was just like, hey, this is what I see. This is how it makes me feel. And she was wonderful. She was gracious. Actually, it was Jasmine Starr, because we did a podcast episode on it on her show. She invited me to talk about this very specifically. And it was a wonderful, from what she said, a learning experience from her, that she said that she was going to now use as a criteria for whether or not she was going to accept speaking engagements moving forward. So depending upon what position you're in, do you want to be someone who focuses on changing what it is that you see? Then it might be helpful depending upon if you're being asked to speak, whether you choose to accept or whether you're choosing not to accept, and why, and giving people that bit of criteria of, listen, I'm only accepting speaking engagements where there is a sufficient amount of diversity and I'm not the diversity on the stage, right? On your speaker lineup. Or as a consumer, you might decide that I'm not going to give my money to conferences that obviously feels like, basically the signal that they're sending, the message that they're sending is there aren't people like me who are worthy to be on this stage. Generally, a lot of times the excuse they give is, oh, but we don't know anybody. But that really just means that you haven't done the due diligence to expand your network, right? So that you can find them, because they're there. It's just, you might not know them, but if you're putting on an event, it's your responsibility to find them.
It absolutely is. I have a friend who I will not name, but she was invited to speak at a big conference, and she's Muslim and visibly Muslim. So she wears a hijab as well, a headscarf. And the organizer of this event told her openly that they don't know any Muslims. They don't know any Muslims that they could invite to speak at this event.
Oh,
and
wow.
it's it's not that you don't know any Muslims, it's that you don't care to know any Muslims.
Yes.
That's what the issue is. Let's be honest, like you said. And I will never go to that event. And it's a popular event as well. I will never go to that event. I will never give my money to that event. I will never say yes if they ever ask me to speak at their event. And so it's just, it's shocking. It's shocking.
Well, going back to where we were starting in the conversation about why should people care? Because people are making decisions, buying decisions about whether or not a brand is inclusive or not. And it's not just inclusive in terms of the marketing materials that you're putting forth. It's, are you an inclusive brand overall, right? So there's a big distinction between just doing inclusive marketing and being an inclusive brand. And I've done a couple of research studies. I did one in 2021, and I'm analyzing the results for the refresh of it for 2024. It's all about the state of representation in marketing. I mean, the responses that consumers are giving in both of these surveys, I talked to over 1,000 people for each one of them, and they're like, we don't want just inclusion and representation in the marketing materials or in your ads or your campaigns. You need to be an inclusive brand throughout. It's the people that you have in your companies. It's the consumers that, like, the actual customers, the testimony, like, it's all of it. And so it just goes, you can't be superficial in your approach. And if you have conversations with people that show that you actually really don't care about that specific community, you're just kind of checking the box, or you can't be bothered to sort of engage and find the very many and vast amounts of people who are Muslim, who are in this space, then you know what? They're not going to do very well when it comes time to attracting that audience, because people know and they see when things are performative, they see whenever it feels authentic and like they belong, and belonging really is the key to all of this.
Oh, I love that. Belonging is the key to all of this, because we all just want to feel like we belong. We all want to feel seen and heard, and as if we matter enough that people are, and brands are catering to us in the way that we need them to. So one question I have for you, because you talk a lot about customer experience. This is all tied in with a customer's experience of a brand or business. Can you give me an example of a time where you were just completely delighted by the customer experience you received from an inclusive kind of perspective?
I'm going to give you this example, and I feel kind of bad about it because it feels like the bar is so low. When I was living in Argentina, Argentina and Buenos Aires specifically, they do a good job of catering to people who are gluten-free generally. And they mostly, they relate it to having celiac. I'm not celiac, but that doesn't mean that I still need to, like, I'm not doing this by choice, right? So I remember I came across this restaurant, which is entirely gluten-free, and it doesn't taste like it's gluten-free. Wow. And it's so good. It's a parrilla, and a parrilla in Argentina, think of it's like a steakhouse. But it's so good, the food there, that people who don't eat gluten-free enjoy eating there. Like, they will go. And so I've, eaten there so many times. I've taken so many people who are not gluten-free, and they've enjoyed themselves. They enjoy the meal. And it was a really good example of a restaurant who has chosen a specific type of consumer as their lead consumer, the gluten-free people, but they have not suffered at all in choosing this one group of people because the food is good. People like coming there, right? And so I just remember the first time I went, and they came and they put bread on the table, and I could eat the bread, right? Like, gosh. I don't think that you realize how a wonderful feeling is. Like, if you've gone out to eat and you've gone to restaurants, and like all your life you get bread, and then you have to go a number of years and they're still going to give you bread, but you can't eat it. And then finally, after years, they put bread on the table and you can eat it. Like, it's just this, like, the joy, the joy that comes, right? To not feel like I have to be that person that's got to ask a million questions to make sure that what I'm going to eat is going to be okay, that I'm not going to be sick. Like, so it was just the entire environment that they created, because it was designed specifically for me, was one that just made me feel so normal. I'm putting quotes here, but like, and it was just a wonderful experience. I still think about, oh my gosh, I could eat the bread. Like, I can eat the bread.
Oh, that's amazing. And that's not a low bar. That's just like the joy of just being included, like you said, belonging. And, you know, it's interesting that you chose a food example, because this is stuff that I never, ever, ever thought about. I don't have any kind of allergies. I've never had anyone in my family who had any kind of allergies until we discovered that my son, as a baby, toddler, which is very common in young kids, had a cow's milk allergy. And oh my gosh, that he had to go vegan. He went vegan at 4 years old.
Wow.
And honestly, it was so much. It was so difficult. It was difficult for me, and I wasn't even the one going through it. But our whole lifestyle changed. Everything changed. It was just so hard on him. And things like his nursery on, you know, he was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And on, of course, people's birthdays, they would come into nursery with cake and all these sweets and everything. And he can't have any of it. Nothing. None of it. And so I remember almost crying one day. I know it sounds really dramatic, but I remember almost crying one day because I came and picked him up, and he told me that the nursery had, like, everyone in his nursery had birthday cake and he didn't have any. And they gave him fruit, and he like took it like a champ, quite frankly. But I think that made it even worse. Like, he just took it so, as a 4-year-old, so maturely and so well. And I was absolutely devastated that he'd been excluded so badly that they couldn't even be bothered to, like, you know, I don't expect them to go shopping for him. Although I did actually pay. I used to pay money for them to shop for him. Yeah. So you could have really considered the fact that you now have a vegan in your class. Yeah. And it's not of our own choice. And even if it was, that should still be fine. But he can't have it. So how could you not think about him? How could you exclude him actively? And so, you know, I told them initially, like, what can we do? And they're like, there's nothing really we can do. And I was like, you know what? I'll sort it. Well, clearly you're not going to do anything, so I'll sort it. So I went shopping and bought him this humongous, and I mean humongous, bag of, like, chocolate, sweets, everything that was suitable for him to eat, cake that he could eat, humongous bag. And then I gave it to them. I said, let me know when it runs out. Every time there's a birthday, you give him something from this bag. So he has sweets, chocolate,
that's amazing.
Cake, just like everyone. Yeah. But it was so upsetting that they didn't just make just a little bit of extra effort to include him. And so now, bear in mind that I'd never been opened up to this world of, like, there's just dietary requirements beyond, quite frankly, like halal, not halal, vegetarian, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And now we have birthday parties with kids. My son, who's no longer allergic to cow's milk, thank God. He grew out of it, which a lot of kids do, thank God. I'm always thinking about the kids with the allergies. I'm like, who's got allergies? What can we get for them? Let's get the vegan stuff.
Let's make sure your perspective.
It entirely changes your perspective. It opened up a whole world and just a new window that I never knew anything about. And so now, you know, even my son is super aware of it. He comes home and he tells me about his friends who have, you know, severe food allergies. And I'm like, okay, great. Good to know. Let's note this down. Make sure we don't put this in your packed lunch and this in your And so, I just remember what a huge deal it was. And it's food. Like you said, it's an everyday part of your life. It's not something little. It's huge. It really is.
It makes a big deal. It makes a big deal. And the experience of it, like, you know, because everybody has a different relationship with what makes them different, their identity. And sometimes people would just rather forget, right? Mm-hmm. Or they just, you know, they would rather forget, or maybe they're fine with it. It's no problem. But, like, at this point in time, with all these other things that are going on, like, I just don't want to have to deal with it today. Right. And so it's just really nice whenever you can engage with a brand who, I don't want to say they proactively do things to deliver an experience that takes that burden that may exist or you may feel away because they've thought of you and they've considered you in advance and they've paved the way for you to have a delightful experience no matter what your identity is. And those are the brands I gladly give my money to. I gladly pay more for, because most of the time you do have to pay more for gluten-free stuff.
Yes.
Right? But I gladly do it because they have taken the time to show me that I am important, and I so much want to reward them for it.
So I think of you now every time I walk into a bathroom and see a sink that is lower than the other sinks for either little kids or the ones that are for people in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
And you spoke about this on your podcast. And now every time I go into a toilet and I see that, I think of you. I think it's so important. And actually, as we speak, I had an accident last week and I injured my foot. Yeah, I injured my ankle quite badly. I thought it was broken. Thankfully, it's not broken, but I tore a ligament in my ankle. And so I've currently got a cast on. I'm wearing a cast for the next 3 to 4 weeks. I was in a wheelchair for the day that I was in the hospital. And I just remember thinking how ill-equipped this world is for people in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
It's shocking. And it took me, I mean, we know this.
Right.
But me actually sitting in a wheelchair and being unable to walk. Yeah. And just thinking, how ill-equipped is this world for people in wheelchairs? Like, I'll get out of this today. Yeah. But, it's
so imagine that you're in a wheelchair for a much longer period of time or for the rest of your life. Which brands are you going to choose? Are you going to choose the ones who make your life a little bit easier or a lot easier by having wheelchair accessible options for entry, for restrooms, for whatever it is? We go to the brands and we are loyal to the brands for our identity. They see us, right? Or they see the people that we love, like in the case of your son, right? Like, it changed the way you operate as a family, right? Yeah. So it's not just that one person with that one identity.
No. And like you said, it has this huge impact. It has this like ripple effect. It has this ripple effect on not just you, but the people around you as well and the people around them. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Okay. I could talk about all of this with you all day, but I want to get on to what we came here for. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, I've got another podcast recommendation for you. It's Augmenters, hosted by Julie Meyer and Jimmy Edgerton, and it's brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. So on this show, Julie and Jimmy dive into mentoring and explore ways to augment and refresh the mentoring environment. They're using 8 core principles that weave relevant spirit guides and diverse guests, and Julie and Jimmy use a lot of humor and practical tips to help mentors and mentees get further, faster together. There's so many great episodes to tune into for this show, but one that you might find especially interesting is their latest episode, number 120, Mentoring Across Gender, Men as Allies and Mentors. Listen to Augmenters wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, Sonia, what is the mistake that made you?
I would say the mistake that made me was not choosing a niche.
Oh, okay. Not choosing a niche. What do you say, niche or niche? There's going to be a lot of niche. There's going to be a lot of niche and niche-ing today, right? Okay, take me back. Let's go back because you clearly have a very strong niche now.
I do.
Take us back to the days where you didn't. What was going on? Tell us about your business back then.
Okay. So I worked my corporate job for 9 years. I worked at Johnson & Johnson. I was in marketing. And then I quit, right? I quit this job to start my own business. And my dream was to start a business which was all about helping smaller brands to apply the principles that these big brands know and use on a daily basis that has allowed them to become these big brands. Because my experience was as a frustrated consumer that far too many small brands just didn't know basic business principles. And so they had a great product, but a terrible experience. And I was specifically remembering salon experiences where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great salon, but I'm like, oh my gosh, like
I'm never coming back. I know.
Right? So I had written a book. I self-published a book. It was called Delight Inside. It was all about customer experience and like weaving those in with basic business principles, et cetera. So my dream was to focus in doing some business coaching. So just to kind of set some foundation for you, whenever I left my job, I had saved up 2 years worth of expenses, right? So I had a good amount of cushion. And so whenever I got started, I did not use my cushion wisely. But whenever I got started, I ended up taking on different projects, different jobs, just kind of, hey, I'm excited. Somebody's paying me, et cetera. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, how do I market my business? I need to learn how to attract people to me. So I started following Copy Blogger. I started really getting deep into content marketing and learning how to create content. I joined different programs that I learned how to blog. I started guest posting. I started a podcast. I had a podcast for 3 years. It was called I Am the One Entrepreneur Edition. So basically I did interviews with entrepreneurs. I did 150 episodes. And so for 3 years straight. And over the course of this time period when I'm learning, I just sort of got lost in terms of like, I love creating content. I love it to the point to where I'm creating content and learning all these things, but I'm actually not actually doing anything specifically to attract the clients to me because, oh, wait, like, what is my niche again? Is it customer experience? Am I a business coach? Like, I'm just talking about all these random things, right? So I'm getting different clients and work, but it's a hodgepodge because it's not really clear. And I tried a bunch of things. I did a virtual summit. Like I said, I started a podcast. I was guest posting. Eventually I worked with a coach who helped me get a column in Inc. So I was writing for Inc. magazine. I was writing 6 articles a month, and that's a lot. Mm-hmm. And what was I writing about? Business stuff, right? Like I was just random business stuff and I was writing. So I was working hard, doing a lot of stuff. But if you were to ask anybody, what is it that you do, Sonia? What is it that people can hire you for? What is your area of expertise? It kind of then sort of shifted in, well, like I do all these content things. And so I kind of shifted to sort of content, but that's not really what I wanted to do. Like I didn't want to be known as a writer or a copywriter. Those were just vehicles that I was using to help me with my business. So as you might imagine, like I struggled, right? I struggled. And during the course of that time period, I left my job in 2012. In 2014, I traveled to South America for the first time. And I traveled for 2 months by bus through like 5 or 6 countries in South America. Wow. And I landed in Argentina and I spent 5 weeks there. And I loved it, fell in love with Argentina. And I ended up going back several times over the course of the next couple of years until I just moved there. And Argentina's cost of living is much different than it was in the US. But what was I doing? I was continuing to learn all these things about content. I had gone to a conference that was about the media and how to get into these big publications, get the media to feature you. And so I took one of the lessons that I learned from this one-day conference and I pitched this woman at Business Insider who was like speaking at this conference, and I pitched her a story idea. And the story idea was like, oh, this woman, this is like the title of it. Mm-hmm. This woman was happy. She was making $200,000 a year. And now she's even more happier making like a quarter as much. Right. And so they're talking about like the contrast between like my corporate job and now my other job, which my full-time job as an entrepreneur, where I wasn't making very much money, but I was like, I'm living in Argentina. It's great. Like, blah, 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 blah. I'm living this dream. And so now again, I've learned how to pitch, but I pitched an article that's not actually going to help me get clients, right? It's just about how I honestly don't make I went from making a lot and not being so happy to making a whole lot less and just being over the moon, right? And so ultimately, through all this, I learned a ton of skills. I got a column. I learned how to pitch. I learned how to get media attention. I learned how to podcast. I learned how to write articles that people want to read. I learned how to create content and blog posts and videos, right? I learned how to do all of that stuff, but I didn't want to do it for other people. So I was just kind of figuring it all out. And so what I started to do was kind of go back to my roots to think more about customer experience. And around that time, I got a Slack message from my editor at Inc. This was 2017. So 5 years or almost 5 years have passed. So I got an email from a Slack message from my Inc. editor. And she was like, "Hey, Sonia, there's this trending hashtag on Twitter, and you're uniquely positioned. Like, you're basically the only one who has enough experience to talk about this." The hashtag was Black Women at Work. And basically, of the contributor network that they had at Inc., this is me deducing, there really aren't very many Black women who can speak on this topic. Mm-hmm. So I was like, sure. And I cranked it out in like 2 hours, and it was live. And, I was happy with it. She was happy. A couple of weeks later, "Hey, Sonia," she sends me a note again. "This is happening. You think you have like a point of view that you can write on this particular what's happening in the news?" Sure. So I wrote it. And then a couple of months later, Rihanna launches with her line for Fenty Beauty. Mm-hmm. I start writing about it because now this is a great topic. But as I was starting to look at the things that I was writing about, things that were sort of happening, more and more I started to see that the stuff that I most enjoyed writing about were related to diversity in marketing, or inclusive marketing, as I now call it, right? And I have a lot of unique experiences, which they're my experiences, they're my lived experiences, but I had completely taken them for granted as the value to the business world. So I'm still now I've sort of pivoted a little bit to the consulting world, and I landed a big client all about customer experience and helping them with their African American engagement strategy. And so I've landed this really big six-figure contract, right? Which I am over the moon excited about, right? Like, it's more money that I had made all the years in my business combined and then some, right? But part of it was customer experience. There was an African American engagement strategy, and there was one other thing in there. So I'm going through that, but I'm still working on like trying to give myself even more credentials for consulting clients. So I was committed to getting into another large publication. I'm still writing for Inc. So I'm part of this organization. I was part of this coaching group that's specifically designed to help you get into Forbes. And because I had applied for Forbes once or twice, and both times had been rejected. And then one woman who is part of the community, she's like, "Hey, Forbes is looking for a diversity columnist. And so here's a contact information," because she saw something that someone posted on LinkedIn. So I reached out and I pitched myself. Here's all my writing samples. I write for Inc., blah, 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 blah. And through the process of it, I pitched them not just like a column in diversity, because DE&I is not the same as inclusive marketing. They're related, but they're two distinct things. Yeah. So I pitched the column idea to be as part of the marketing vertical, and I would be talking about inclusive marketing. And so they loved it. And so now I have a column in Forbes specifically on inclusive marketing, customer experience, and belonging, right? And so now I've got this Inc. column. I've got this Forbes column. I just finished with this client. Then I went in September of this year of 2018 now, to Shine Bootcamp. Shine Bootcamp was a weekend long program, which the whole objective was to equip women speakers to be ready for the stage. So we would go for this weekend boot camp. We would get teamed up with coaches, and at the end of it, we would deliver a 10-minute speech They would video the speech for us. They would take our headshots. So we finished the program with assets that we could be using. So of course you could talk about whatever you want. And I talked about inclusive marketing, right? And I did this talk and they loved it, loved it. So I'm getting some momentum, and like people that I knew within the industry, I knew their names, you know, they were talking to me. I got invited to do a guest post on Joanna Weeb's Copy Hackers.
We love copy hackers over here. We love Joanna Weeb.
Joanna was one of the coaches. She wasn't my coach, but she was one of the coaches, and she was present. So she heard it and she's like, oh, I've been thinking about this from this point of view. What do you think of writing an article? So I published on her website. My coach was Ollie, and he was one of the co-founders of Unbounce. So a couple of months later, I got an invitation to be one of the keynote speakers at their CTA conference. So I did that. I got another speaking engagement to speak on inclusive marketing, which was very much, they wanted an expansion of my 10-minute talk. So the momentum is coming, right? And like, so I'm continuing along with my consulting work, which I'm happy about because they're higher ticket clients. They can take me for a longer period of time. I'm still living in Argentina. And so while I'm living in Argentina, I met my husband, married my husband, and then we got pregnant, right? And so my daughter is born in April 2020. And so what happens in May 2020? George Floyd happens, and the world is just upside down. So I'm on maternity leave, and then I get this message from the editor in chief of like Inc. and was like, hey, can you write an article about like what's happening? Like, what should business owners be doing? What should they be thinking about? Like, how should they respond to this? And I'm like, I'm on maternity leave, but like, okay, I'll write this, you know. So while Luna, that's my daughter, while she was sleeping, I cranked out an article, sent it. And so I'm working with them, collaborating. It went live the next day. And so I'm like, oh, wait, like this is like really got some legs, and it's a unique moment. So then I was like, well, let me see something else. So I pitched Amy Porterfield to be a guest on her podcast to talk about inclusive marketing. She responded right away. Like the next week we recorded the episode. It was published like the next week, like the end of June. So yeah, like there was a lot of momentum, a lot of things happening. So through the rest of my maternity leave, because I took 3 months, when Luna was sleeping, I would like start to update my website, start to change my messaging a little bit. And whenever I came back to work, I fully like committed. I'm all in on inclusive marketing.
Wait a minute. It was only at that point that you started to lean in.
I started to like connect. I started to like really connect the dots. So I went through a lot in like a year's time or 2 years time frame, but I was doing it, but I hadn't made it like 100% my thing.
Okay,
right?
wait. I need to know why. What was going on? Because at this point, you've established yourself in this area, in this field. What were you feeling or going through, or what was stopping you, preventing you from going from nicheless to
I hadn't fully gotten, I had gotten interest in momentum, but I hadn't fully gotten like all of my income from there. Okay. So I was doing consulting. And so like, let's say that one big contract that I had back in 2018, one piece of it was inclusive marketing, but I hadn't necessarily thought through or figured out like, so in 2019, when I had another contract, it wasn't it was about customer experience, right? And so it wasn't necessarily directly connected. So because the things that people were hiring me for at this point, they were more customer experience focused. I hadn't fully switched. I was getting requests. I was getting known for inclusive marketing, but it wasn't yet like paying the bills.
Okay. So this is a really interesting topic. I talk a lot about how to niche. I have a 90-minute masterclass called Nail Your Niche, which you can find on my website. And I talk about this a lot because a lot of people who come to me expect this, like, I call it this transition period. They expect that this transition period to really happen overnight. Like, okay, today I'm waking up and I'm going to be an expert in this, and everyone should just accept that. And I'm going to launch the website, and that's it. And it's done. But actually, there's a transition period that can take a really long time. For me, I went from generalist copywriter to email strategist and copywriter. And I would say it took a full year before I was like only getting like great email projects.
Yeah.
Before that point in that transition year, I was taking on whatever would bring me money and help me pay the bills behind the scenes. So I would take on like all these other projects that I didn't really want to do, but would help pay the bills. But what I didn't do was talk about those projects and tell everyone like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And because it didn't align with what I wanted to position myself as.
Yeah.
So I only spoke about the email project. I only spoke about the email strategy stuff that I wanted people to hear me talking about and then hire me for.
Yeah.
And so it's there's this long period where it can take a while before you know, are really in a position where your niche is the primary like moneymaker. And that's okay.
Yeah. And it takes a while to sort of change everything, right? Like if people, and so let's go back also, we have to consider with inclusive marketing, it's still very new. Yes. And even though it was hot and people were thinking more about it in 2020, I was able to capitalize, but not so much because again, I was on maternity leave. And then also I was living in Argentina. So I wasn't able to do like go all in. So I went, I created like an online course, which is all about inclusive marketing, Inclusive Brand Academy. I was able to build a framework and combine that with customer experience because inclusive marketing and customer experience like go hand in hand. So I was able to do all of that. And I've spent the last few years really focusing on thought leadership in the world of inclusive marketing because there isn't really a ton of information out there. And because it's such a newer field, there are people who kind of understand it and they get it, but they don't necessarily realize what that means for them in terms of how to change and shift their marketing. I think sometimes they feel like, oh, we can just change up some of our photography and like, that's it. Right.
Yeah.
And we don't need to hire somebody to do that, but it's so much more. So I've spent more time on the thought leadership aspects of it, aligning my content, my website. I ended up launching a new podcast. So the original podcast I had, I Am the One Entrepreneurship, I like to call as my starter podcast that prepared me to launch a very niche focused podcast is the one I have now. It's inclusion and marketing. So after some time, I think I launched that in 2022.
And it's also part of the HubSpot podcast network.
Yes. So I started that. I had 20 episodes in, and then I was able to join the HubSpot network. And then momentum keeps going. I've been working with consulting projects actually coming specifically related to inclusive marketing with large companies. Some of them I can't even say their names because like contractually we're not allowed to say them, but working with some very well-known brands on inclusive marketing and helping them with that transformation. And then I now have columns that I write for HubSpot every month on inclusive marketing. And so the body of work is deep and the niche is deep. And, but there's also like when you're sort of pioneering an area and educating and thinking about it, that takes a lot of effort too, to help people understand more about what they should be hiring for. So I would say just this year, after all that, even though I've been inclusive marketing, let's say I started in 2017, all in since 2020, I finally feel like I really nailed down my roadmap of what my product offerings are, how I can best help people, what is it they need most. And that's only been because I've been in the trenches, thinking about it, trying different things, doing it. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh, that works. Oh, this is what they need. And then, it's a process.
I have some questions for you because you have done this so well. What moved your needle the most? Because this is what people struggle with most. It's like, how do I get that momentum? How do I start that momentum?
I was on publications that people trust talking about this topic. So I had an Inc. column. I had a Forbes column. I did the guest posts on Copy Hackers. I got on stages from brands that people trusted. So it was all about leveraging, borrowing other people's trusted brands and audiences. And that was really what did it for me, I would say.
And it's such a clever strategy because we spend years trying to build our own platforms from scratch and like publishing into the void. And, you know, it will get traction eventually, but it just takes so much longer. So that's a really great strategy and a great reminder for me to keep to keep pushing, to keep doing that.
Yeah. It's a lot of work, and you just have to think of it like, I would never think of it in terms of one article or one podcast or video is going to do it. One guest post is going to do it. You just have to think about it as your body of work. I remember there was a contract that I had gotten that turned into a 6-figure contract over the course of a year from an article that I wrote on Forbes. I had no idea that that article would lead to a contract. And I've written a lot of articles over the years. And, you know, every now and then you can point to, oh, I know it was this one or that, or maybe people are looking at it over time. A client that I've been working with this year, she found me through my podcast, right? But like, and she's listened to some episodes, but it's not one episode in particular, like it's the body of work. So you really have to just think about how can you create that body of work that people are say, oh, inclusive marketing, like Sonia, like, email marketing, you know, it's obvious. You're the obvious choice because everything that you do is synonymous and you've been doing it for such a long period of time. Not like you wrote that one post one time.
Yeah. You know, I love this idea of body of work. Like that's really sparked a kind of light bulb in my mind because that's exactly what it is. And it's so motivating because, you know, sometimes we have those moments when, especially when you're going down the kind of thought leadership route, you are publishing here, you're going on this podcast and that podcast. Sometimes you have this dream in your head, like if I can just get on this platform, if I can just get in front of these people, if I can just be interviewed by so-and-so, if I can just speak on this stage, my life will change, my business will change. And then when that thing happens, and then your entire life and business doesn't change overnight. It can be really disappointing and you can lose a lot of motivation. And so instead of putting the pressure on on one thing to change everything, it's working on all these little things and that you know, you build in all these things on top of each other. That really makes because
happen. You never know when one person will read something, see something, hear something. Oh, this clicked. This is exactly what I need in this moment. Let me reach out to them because I know they're an expert because they're the person that I need at this point in time. And so you don't know what it's going to be. And the thing sometimes that you think this is going to hit. This is going to be popular. They're going to be banging my door down to like come and hire me. And it's nothing. Yeah. And then, you know, it could be this random other thing that you produced and okay, wow. All right, let's do it. Right. But that's why you have to focus on just doing the work, creating that body of work consistently. And you'll wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, now my podcast, I've got over 100. I think I just sent to my editor episode 129. Right. And so it's just, it's a process. I've written hundreds of articles for Inc. and Forbes over the years. And it's all part of it.
Wow. You got to do the work. I mean, I totally agree. For me, Nation definitely changed the trajectory of my business. It changed everything for me. But even so, I would still say it's only now, how many years into it? 4 years into it? Yeah. Nearly 5 years into only talking about email, you know, like just being just crazy about email strategy and copy and nothing else. I would say only now do I really feel like I have like I have become that expert in people's minds, that association is always there. And it's funny because when I see like people posting stuff on social media and they're like, oh, I'm looking for an email marketer, or I'm looking for an email strategist, or someone to help me with my emails. If I don't see my name in those comments, I get so annoyed at myself, not at them, at myself. I'm like, I've got work to do. I've still got work to do because I should be being mentioned in every single post.
I'm with you 100%. And it makes perfect sense, right? Like, and I think because there honestly aren't enough people who commit themselves to that thought leadership and to that work of creating that body of work on a particular topic. And it just makes it makes you sharper and has a point of view on a lot more things. And to the benefits of niching, I have a client that we're in the contracting phase right now. It's another corporate client, which will start this year, but hopefully like we've got plans to continue along for more work next year. And I remember they reached out to me, right? Whenever they reached out to me and we started talking and they're like, this is a really specialized skill set, right? And there aren't a ton of people who can do this, right? And so I really appreciate that the body of work has now made me an ideal partner with these corporate clients that turn into much larger contracts for me. And there's not a whole lot of like proving myself specifically for them because I've been proving myself over the years with the body of work. And so you just sort of eliminate a lot of the competition and you almost sort of write your own template or job description for the different clients that you work with, which it's just a really wonderful feeling. And then hopefully it turns into, talk to her. And it's about making sure that, of course, that you deliver with the work.
Yeah, they already trust you. They don't need any evidence from it. They don't need you to prove yourself. You've already proven yourself. You've been proving yourself. Yeah. It's amazing how that works. Okay, so tell me, how did this mistake of not niching make you?
So whenever I finally started to connect the dots about inclusive marketing being the thing that I needed to go all in on, I had the skills to maximize it. So I already had an Inc. column. Oh, I want to focus on inclusive marketing. All I had to do was just start writing about inclusive marketing. Whenever I was able to get the Forbes column, I already had an Inc. column. And so I was able to connect the dots with articles that I had already written. I already had all the skills that I needed to do what I do at a high level. All I needed to do was just change the topic. Now, and topic on something that I already had an entire life of lived experience on. And these are skills that wouldn't have happened overnight. And so the same way, like my expertise in inclusive marketing didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like, oh, I'm an inclusive marketer and now I got to figure out how to get the word out. I already know how to get the word out. And I've already got these platforms that I have access to where people trust me because one, they know I know how to create content. And two, they know that I will be able to do it consistently at a high level. And so it was a topic that we are lacking on in terms of expertise. So that 3-year starter podcast that I have paved the way for me to have this podcast that is now part of the HubSpot network, right? That wouldn't have happened if I would have just started a podcast for the first time with this inclusion and marketing podcast. How long would it have taken to me to get into Forbes if I didn't already have the Inc. column? Would I have even been thinking about that I needed to get into Forbes if I hadn't already been writing? Would I have been invited to write guest posts if I didn't already have relationships? And would I have gotten invited to speak on stages if I hadn't already done the training, gone through this boot camp where I had all these assets ready to go so that people already know she knows how to speak? It's just how do we get her on our stage to talk about this topic? I basically had just spent let's say 5-6 years in my business where it felt like I was floundering around developing extremely valuable skills that whenever I finally realized, oh, Sonia, this is your niche. All I had to do was flip the switch and the skills were there and I just needed to activate them. So it's kind of one of those things where I like to say that nothing is ever wasted. And even though at the time it was painful and it felt like it was wasted, all of it worked together to support me in what I'm doing today and has just made me to be able to be this thought leader because I had already had developed the skills on how to do that in a number of different mediums. It was just time to activate it.
See, I think this is such an important part of the conversation because so often when people decide to niche into something that's different from whatever they've been doing before, there's this feeling that, oh my gosh, I have to start all over. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this to myself. I have to start from scratch. Yeah. I'm at square one again. Mm-hmm. And it's just never the case. It's just never the case. I remember I did feel like that initially in January 2020 when I decided to tell the world that I was an email strategist and copywriter. I remember just thinking, first of all, will anyone even hire me? At this time, at that point, back in 2020, there really weren't, this wasn't like a huge specialism.
Yeah.
People would go to a generalist copywriter and say, hey, I want emails. And the copywriter would just do emails. That's what I had been doing as well for my clients. And so I was having conversations with people who were hiring me who would say things like, I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't know that I could hire an email strategist or an email copywriter. I just didn't know. I thought that, you just hire a copywriter. This is great that I can have a specialist. And so that's how kind of it felt like that's how early I was in this kind of picture, in this scene. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to have to start all over again. I can't believe I'm starting all over again. And then thinking, no, I'm not starting all over again. I've already been in business for 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not new to this. I'm not starting from scratch. I have a business that's 2 years old. I've been doing really well. Now I build on this. I build on it. And so what you're saying, I think is really hopeful and will give people a lot of hope because it's not, like you said, none of that work is done in vain.
Right.
None of it goes to waste. I believe that there's a reason for everything and that there's a lesson in everything, which is what this whole podcast is about.
Yeah.
And, you take everything that you know and you run with it. You just run with it.
Absolutely. And I would say from 2021 till today, 100% of my revenue has been related to inclusive marketing. And so we're in September now as we record this. And so I've already got revenue booked for 2025 related to inclusive marketing, but all as a result of being niched. But that niched came from, that years of preparation and frustration.
Wow. Amazing. So I have a friend who is a pay gap consultant and her true love is this work of being a pay gap consultant and helping companies figure out their pay gap and how to close their pay gap. Now, gender pay gap specifically.
Yeah. Such a cool job and so needed, unfortunately, but
it is. Well, listen to this. So she's a Black woman. And then when everything, happened in May 2020 with George Floyd and companies actually started to, be concerned with diversity and inclusion, everyone was calling her up. We need you to come and speak to our company about racial justice and, the ethnic pay gap or the racial pay gap. And she was like, okay, this is great, but this is not my passion. This is not my passion.
Yeah.
My passion is the gender pay gap. But she was being pushed into this sphere because the need was so strong.
Right.
So I remember at that time, and I remember how, first of all, how big this conversation was. And I remember also having conversations with her about how in demand she was and how successful her business was at that time. And I wonder, did you have any fear going into this that it was a phase, that it would be a phase that would just phase out once this conversation was over?
So I didn't have fear But I would say last year, it became clear that the momentum that a lot of brands had put into thinking more inclusively in their marketing specifically, and it was happening with D&I and overall, was fading. The momentum from 2020 was fading, and in some instances backtracking. And now as we see more things that are D&I related seeming to be attacked, it did, I believe, cause some hesitation on some people as it relates to marketing. However, for me, that just meant a messaging pivot in terms of how I talked about inclusive marketing. And so then I started saying and making sure that I leaned hard into how it tied to business results and speaking about how it impacted conversion rates and customer success and all that other kind of stuff. So a just slight messaging shift and showcasing the ways in which brands that we all know and love are still doing this and are thriving because of it, and about what consumers are really saying. It really kind of shuts that out. And because I don't need 50 clients or 100 clients for it to work, I need to make sure that I'm speaking specifically to the people who really get it and they know it wasn't a fad, to make sure that I am able to make the numbers I need to for the year. And so because more and more large companies they get it, like they see the numbers, and because of the transformation that happens to that needs to be had, they need more of a longer term partner, I guess you would say. So it's not like whenever I first started here, there was a lot of training. That was the common request that would come through. Yeah. And I've done so many trainings, and it's great to do the training. However, now as I've worked with them and see like what was actually done with the training, I recognize that training isn't really what is needed for them to have that transformation. They need a transformation plan. I've got a framework. I've got product offerings now that speak to that, and training is a component of it. It is not the thing, right? And so because I evolved in terms of understanding more about what brands need and what marketers need, it helped me better tailor my messaging, my conversation, the thought leadership things that I talk about, and even what I offer to be more aligned with what people need to achieve success. So it's more being driven around, of course, my expertise in terms of what I feel like the market needs, but less about it being consumer driven. We need training. Yeah. Actually, you need more than that. Yes. Right. And so if you're just coming for like a training session, then it kind of shows that you're not really the ideal client for what it is I'm trying to accomplish, because you need something bigger than that. And I'm happy to be a partner with you on becoming an inclusive brand, which requires more time, more mindset work, more policy shifts and adjustment, structure, etc.
More budget.
Yes, more budget.
More budget. So this is fascinating because I'm hearing you say that when things kind of slow down in your field, the answer was to just dial in, just really dial into your niche again. Your like the purest form of the people that you're serving and that you want to serve.
Yeah. It wasn't to like retreat at any point, because the work isn't done. Like we are just scratching the surface, right? So, but that was part of what I felt was my role as a thought leader in the industry, was to continue to sound that alarm on, like, it doesn't matter what's happening and what you see from the noise standpoint. Like, this is what your business needs. Mm-hmm. Your business will suffer if you don't do this. And the way I like to describe it is started doing a better job of speaking to the love language of the clients that I wanted to serve. Their love language is business results. It's business results. So how can I make sure that I'm connecting the dots and their risk of not taking action to business results?
I love that. What is your ideal client's love language? I love it. Okay, Sonia, it's been amazing talking to you. Last question. What do you want other people who are listening to this to learn from your experience?
I want them to know that nothing is ever wasted. And although you might not be today where you want to be, know that every experience, every frustration, every win, they're all connected. And if you are in tune to letting everything teach you a lesson and give you the pushes and the nudges in the direction that you need to go, know that you will get there. And as you're going through that process, don't look for anything to be don't look for any one thing to be a single home run. Focus instead on the overall body of the work that you need to create, and know that in time, you will get the results that you seek. So in the meantime, do whatever you need to do to make sure that you can pay the bills so that you don't have to give it all up.
Amazing. Excellent advice. I totally agree. Thank you so much for being here. It was amazing talking to you.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of tea in this episode. If you like this episode and if you're enjoying the Inclusion in Marketing podcast, I would so appreciate it if you would leave a rating and review for it in your podcast player of choice. It really does go a long way towards helping more people discover the show. Another quick question for you. Are you getting the Inclusion in Marketing newsletter? If not, let's change that. Each week, I send news, tips, resources, and other goodies to help you attract and retain a bigger, more diverse, and fiercely loyal customer base. Go to inclusioninmarketing.com/newsletter to get signed up. I'll also drop a link for that in the show notes for you below. Until next time, remember, everyone deserves to have a place where they belong. Let's use our individual and collective power to ensure more people feel like they do. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you soon.